It's certainly been heating up here, and I think for a lot of people across the country, you've been experiencing the same thing. For those of you who might be starting to see some browning in your yard, either it's some spots or some widespread browning, today I want to talk about why that might be happening, what you might do about it, or what you might not have to do about it. So the first thing I think we always need to talk about is whether you have a warm season grass or whether you have a cool season grass. So for most of this video, in terms of the browning that we're talking about and what happens to our grasses during the summer in terms of our region with cool season grass, I'm going to be going over that here and what you should be doing. Now, if you're down south or if you have a warm season grass in the transition zone, then this is the time of year when that heat is actually a good thing for your yard. Now, not extreme heat if you're not able to get any irrigation to it, but if you have something like Bermuda or you have some zoysia or St. Augustine and you're experiencing these warm temperatures, you don't have to go quite as crazy and worry about it as we do up here in order to keep things going. But you do still need irrigation, and you do still need to be doing your fertilizer program for those grasses. So let's talk though about cool season grass and what happens during this summertime. So right now it's been over 90 here where I'm at for about a week or so. And even though you might be getting rain, which we haven't, but even if you are, a lot of times those temperatures are going to start to make the yard go slightly off color from what it was or start to brown the yard. And this is something that happens with cool season grass that is natural for it to do. So spring and fall are when it thrives. The summertime is when we always talk about we're just trying to survive that time frame. And you can make the grass continue to be green in certain ways, but it's not ever going to look exactly like it does in those cooler parts of the year. But I've been seeing a lot of people saying my yard was looking good in the springtime with cool season grass and now it's starting to get brown. What should I do about it? So let's go over a couple things that might be happening. This browning happens because of heat stress or drought stress, or it's just trying to go into a natural phase of dormancy, which means it's going to be sitting there still living, but it's not going to look exactly the same. It's going to look more brown. The plant is still surviving, but it's trying to protect itself. That is part of the process of cool season lawns, is that natural ability to try to protect itself from the heat and survive that and get to the cooler parts of the year. So with something like Kentucky bluegrass that I used to have in my backyard, I want to show you this photo here when it was completely dormant one summer. Now it's brown as straw pretty much, but it's not dead. It's still living and it's going to come back to be green in the fall with a proper care, and once rainfall comes back and those cooler temperatures come back. So this was the same year towards the end of fall. You'll see that that yard was brown. I did nothing to it other than it got water in the fall. I fertilized properly and started mowing properly again, and then it ends up turning back into this. With Kentucky bluegrass, I found that it kind of wants to go to this dormant period maybe more than something like tall fescue, but it does survive this really well, even though it doesn't look great. It does survive that and come back in the fall. Now fescue a lot of times will tend to have deeper roots. Sometimes that can help to keep it greener during this extreme period of heat, and even though it does get somewhat stressed, it should do slightly better than Kentucky bluegrass in most cases. What I'm seeing here in my backyard is that what I definitely knew was there is that I do still have some bluegrass mixed into it here and there. Remember that when this whole debacle happened, I sprayed it out the same day and I seeded, so I wasn't sure what was all there and what wasn't there, but there's definitely some bluegrass still mixed into here because I can tell it's wanting to check out now, and most of the fescue that's there is starting to get stressed because I haven't put any irrigation on it yet, but it's doing much better than my bluegrass used to do in the backyard. Pay attention to those grass types. If you have something like perennial ryegrass, I would be careful about letting it go into that dormancy period for too long. I've found with my perennial ryegrass that as soon as it starts to want to check out, especially along my sidewalks here, it will get really brown really quickly and it can actually die off pretty fast too. So where bluegrass tends to have that brown look for a while and it will come back, I've found that I have to be more careful with my ryegrass because it will burn up and sometimes it just doesn't come back. The question becomes then, I think for a lot of people, should you let the grass go into that dormancy period or should you try to water, or what should you do? Really, this will come down to whatever you want to do personally. I know there's a lot of water restrictions happening in different places now, so this might come down to something that you really don't have control over if you can't get much water to the plant. But that should allow you to let it go into dormancy if it needs to, and still make sure that you're watering it maybe a quarter of an inch every 2 to 3 weeks or so if you don't get any rain at all. You can let it get brown and dormant, but you still need to keep the crown of the plant alive. So every 2 to 3 weeks, get some sort of water to it that's going to keep it from completely dying off. If you want to try to maintain more green and water it, then I would suggest that you get ahead of that before it gets too brown. It's more difficult to take it out of that dormancy period than it is to just make sure you get water to it right away. So on the backyard here for me, I've been letting this go more on the dry side. And to be honest with you, I wanted to be able to experience what a lot of you are probably going to experience this year in terms of letting it go into more of a dormant phase and seeing how to take it out of that as we get into the fall time. So the watering thing is really up to you, but what I would suggest as well is that if you do start watering, to try to keep doing that and not let it go in and out of wanting to be stressed and brown. It would be better if you can water, keep up your watering through this hot summer period, and then not watering for a while and then trying to bring it back out of dormancy. I would just suggest to make one decision and go with that. The other thing that I've been seeing a lot because of the heat and humidity has been different types of fungus that are going on in various yards. So this will be something to pay attention to if you see some browning. You want to try to differentiate whether you have a fungus problem going on or whether it's just a heat or drought stress thing that's happening. If you have a widespread, dry, consistent look over the yard, then most likely you're just dealing with it wanting to go into dormancy. But if you have more localized spots, or you're seeing brown areas that start to be dying out, but not all the way across the yard, but in localized areas, then you'll want to pay attention to maybe a fungus going on. So it's very hard to diagnose what you might have specifically going on in your yard in terms of fungus. If you have questions about that, reach out to a local extension office or see if you can find someone in your specific area that might know better of the typical problems that are happening in that area and what you might be able to do about it as far as control. It's very hard for me to tell you because there's so many different types of fungus and there's so many different types of products that you don't just want to go using something that you have no idea whether it's going to work or not. So make sure you do your research on that if possible and reach out to someone that might know better about what's happening in your specific area. But something that I've been seeing slightly on some of my fescue back here has been some brown patch. This is very typical of fescue, especially in humid environments. Just pay attention to those things if you can. Get it on top of them early so that you don't end up with a yard that's completely destroyed by fungus. The other thing that can be causing some brown spots in your yard that people often mistake for maybe a fungus or something else going on would be dog spots. In the springtime here, I didn't have as many problems with this because we were getting proper irrigation and a lot of rainfall. So those dog spots didn't really tend to show up because the grass was in good shape, it was getting consistent water and diluting all of that stuff. But now that we're into the heat, it's starting to get stressed here in my backyard. I've been starting to see a few dog spots show up here and there. Pay attention to that too and don't mistake it for something else, but watch your dog where they're going and if possible, water down that spot right away or have a jug out there and dilute that right away so that you don't end up with a whole bunch of dead spots from this. So that's really the easiest way to do it, or train them to go off of the yard if possible. I know for us, we just keep a can handy here or have our hose out there on the back of our house ready to spray down and dilute those spots so that we don't have a lot of widespread damage from that. One other quick tip now that I'm thinking about it is don't be scalping off your lawn. I see a lot of people still letting their yard grow for a week or so, letting it get to 4 or 5 inches and then coming in and cutting it at 1.5 inches in this heat, and it's going to turn brown very, very quickly. So please remember that as an amazingly important step, not to continue to scalp off grass. If it gets to 4 or 5 inches, set your deck to 3 inches and mow it. You're going to be way better off. It's not going to get as brown as fast and it's not going to get so stressed out. Do your best to just hang on through this summer season if you have that cool season grass. And if you start to see some damage, plan accordingly and plan ahead if you need to get some seed or do some repair to your yard to get it back in shape for the fall. Hopefully that helps you today to understand why things might be turning brown, what to do about it, what to think about. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.